Reece Walsh's message to Broncos amid calls to terminate Ezra Mam's $4 million contract. Can a single act of contrition in the face of unforgivable mistake remind an entire sport what forgiveness actually costs? The Brisbane Broncos are bleeding, not on the field, but in the soul of the club. Ezra Mam, the electrifying 5'8" who dances through defenses like wind through bamboo, now sits in a storm of his own making. A failed drug test, a car crash, a night that began with promise and ended with sirens. $4 million on the table, a contract that was meant to crown him the Prince of Lang Park, suddenly feels like the heaviest chain in Queensland. And while the headlines scream for exile, while keyboards hammer out calls to tear up the deal and cast him into the wilderness, one voice rises above the rage. Reece Walsh, the fullback with lightning in his boots and thunder in his heart. The same Reece who grew up idolizing the Broncos, who wept when he pulled on the jersey for the first time, who knows better than anyone what it feels like to be the prodigal son. Please like, share, and subscribe for more Sport Talk content. It was a quiet afternoon at Red Hill, the kind where the Queensland sun burns forgiveness out of the sky. Players moved like ghosts through the gym. Nobody laughed. Nobody dared. Then Reece gathered the group in the film room, lights off, just the glow of brotherhood. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice carried the tremble of someone who had already walked through fire. He looked straight at Ezra, eyes red but steady, and said the words that would echo far beyond those four walls. Mate, we don't abandon family when they fall. We carry them until they can run again. You could hear the air leave the room. Grown men, hardened by 1,000 tackles, felt their chests cave in. Some looked away so nobody would see the tears. Others nodded slowly, as if an ancient code had just been spoken aloud for the first time in years. The cameras weren't there. The journalists weren't invited. This was sacred ground. But word traveled faster than any highlight reel. Within hours, Broncos fans who had been baying for blood on social media fell strangely silent. A few posted the simple emoji of a maroon heart, then more, then thousands. By nightfall, Broncos family was trending higher than any contract termination hashtag ever could. This is what the outrage merchants will never understand. They see a mistake and reach for the guillotine. Reece saw a brother drowning and threw the only rope he had, his own reputation, his own legacy, his own unblemished standing in the game. And in that single gesture, he did something rarer than a 90-meter intercept try. He reminded an entire code that rugby league, for all its brutality, began in working-class lounge rooms where second chances weren't a luxury. They were oxygen. Think about the history stitched into that Broncos jersey. Langer pulling tall poppies down to earth with a quiet word. Lockyer forgiving teammates who cost grand finals. Gillette playing with a face fractured in 8 places because the team needed him. This club was never built on perfection. It was built on stubborn, unreasonable loyalty. Ezra Mam is indigenous. He carries country in his blood the way other men carry scars. The easy headline would have been, "Another young black fella throws it all away." Reece Walsh, proud First Nations man himself, just rewrote that story before it could be printed. He didn't excuse the mistake. Forgiveness without accountability is just weakness wearing a halo. But he drew a line in the Queensland dirt. Punishment belongs to the game, redemption belongs to us. Days later, when the media finally cornered Reece outside the training center, microphones thrust like spears he didn't dodge. "I've made my own mistakes," he said, voice soft but unbreakable. "I know what it's like to be the kid everyone gives up on. Ezra's not a write-off. He's 22, he's scared, and he's ours." Then he added the line that will be painted on walls one day. If we cut him loose now, we're not protecting the jersey. We're admitting the jersey was never big enough to cover pain. The Broncos didn't tear up the contract. They suspended him. They wrapped him in welfare. They made the path back brutal because love sometimes has to hurt before it heals. And somewhere in Ipswich, a young Indigenous kid who just failed a test at school saw the news, saw Reece Walsh stand in the gap, and for the first time thought, maybe falling doesn't have to be the end of the story. That's the thing about real leadership. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just refuses to let go. Years from now, when the highlights of Mam's career roll, when he carves up State of Origin again, when he lifts a premiership, There will be a quiet 30-second clip they should always play first. No tries, no sidesteps, just Reece Walsh in a dark room choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. Because some moments don't belong to statistics, they belong to the soul of the game. Ezra spoke publicly for the first time last week. Voice cracking, he said, "Reece didn't have to fight for me, but he did. I owe him every run I ever make from now on. I owe this club every breath." That's legacy, not the contract, not the dollars. The moment one Warrior looked at another who had fallen and said, "Not on my watch." So when the world rushes to cancel, to cut, to move on, remember Red Hill. Remember a fullback who understood that the Broncos jersey isn't maroon because it's pretty. It's maroon because sometimes you have to bleed for the bloke next to you. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most Queensland thing of all.